Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic Bonanza. Coming straight out of Northport. Represent. Hope everyone's doing good. So, yeah, today is Tuesday, and it is about 10 o'clock Tuesday morning, and I just got the word from work. I work part time at the awesome school that is known as the Montessori School. I'm here in Belfast, and we are having a snow day, so I have the day off. We're expected. It's expected to be some this crazy nor'easter. I think is supposedly coming here this afternoon. So they already called school. So we'll see. And it's supposed to snow all the way until Wednesday. So yeah, winter's not done yet. So here we go. So more time and more reasons to make some more videos. So again, I always love to start the show by thanking people joining in, new folks that have been subscribing. We're almost at 300 right now, and I really appreciate the love and the support. This is, a real deep love for me to do. To doing this channel is just a real big passion project of mine. I really love it, and I love when there's times when people check out a video. I tend to cover mostly for the most part films that are a little bit more on the obscure side of things. But I always try to mix things up. I have lots of interests, lots of different tastes. But as people, we always have our thing that we kind of always gravitate towards. And those movies that make up the majority of this channel, which are the exploitation movies that are pretty underground. Those are that thing always remains, and the coverage of those films always kind of remains the main focus of this channel. So I love it when there's been more and more folks commenting on the videos, and we've been kind of conversing back and forth through the comments section. Lots of people I've never met before, and a few folks have been making some recommendations for, well, if you like this movie, you might like this one, or if you like this director, you might like this guy. And so that's super cool, and I love it. And and then I've gotten some cool feedback from folks where they like some of the issues that I talk about around that are related to film, and and some of the points that I try to make about the process of filmmaking, and also the process of being a viewer, like being a fan. I try to look at it. I try to always look at things not so much from a black and white standpoint, and it's not just film. I try to look at things, and it can be, like I said, any kind of subject, but I try to look at things from different angles all the time. I'm trying to always get different perspectives. I love having interaction with people who have very different backgrounds or different interests. I love, I love having that experience, and I try to always look at things from different perspectives. A lot of the times, I don't think, I think most things are, on one hand, pretty simple and straightforward, but I also think most things are more complicated than they appear to be. So I try to, strike a balance with that perspective. And the way that I try to do that is by looking at things from through different lenses. I don't necessarily look at too many things as black and white. I feel like there's always a middle ground or a middle area, third side perspective, if you will. So that's kind of most of the time how I just generally operate, around things. But again, people, the new folks that have been checking out this channel and this page, commenting and sharing ideas and recommendations. That's super awesome. And like I said too, there's been times where people have said some very nice things, and also when it comes to the actual films, there's been some folks that have said that some of these movies they've never heard of, so they're kind of excited by that, so they'll seek these movies out. And at the end of the day, it's about the films. That's it's not really about me. Yeah, I want the page to grow. It would be nice at some point, maybe down the road, if I was able to make a little bit of money with this, have another source of income, or build up a Patreon thing. But I want the channel to grow. I'm always thinking of new ideas, and there's tons and tons of videos I want to get to. I get more and more fired up by doing this really every day, every week. But at the end of the day, it's really about these films. So in previous videos, or actually I should say, I did my first interview for Film Fanatic. I did a podcast with a cool guy called his name is Matthew Littlefield, and I've known him. I knew him through some past experiences, through some gigs that we had played together many years ago. But the last couple of years or so, he started he started a podcast, and so we talked about doing a show together, and it's a really cool podcast. He covers lots of different things, some like social issues, things that really pertain to us here living in the mid coast. But he also does shows on music and also film. So we did a show together where we did talk about music, but the main focus was movies, and in particular the this page here, Film Fanatic, and this channel. And we kind of took a pretty deep dive into a lot of the movies that I cover, a lot which is mostly made up of films from the exploitation world. And he was kind of asking me about, what is it about these films that I really love, and that movies that I feel like I need to cover. Talked about that, but then he also asked me questions about, because I said to him also, and it's pretty obvious on my channel, you know, I try to cover lots of different things. Like I'll cover, really obscure, super low budget, grimy exploitation movies like the movies of Herschel Gordon Lewis. But then I've also done shows on where I've reviewed Avatar: The Way of Water. So, polar opposites in every conceivable way. But at the end of the day, if it's a film I like, and a film that resonates with me, that's the only thing I ask. It doesn't matter. I don't really, at that point, I don't really care about the style or genre. If whatever it is, if it resonates with me, that's it. But like I said, we all have our things that we kind of naturally gravitate towards. Like that's something that's kind of just your jam, and that you always go back to, like kind of your well, that source of inspiration. So I always naturally gravitate back towards my first and foremost love, which is the world of exploitation, particularly the horror exploitation. And he was asking me questions about what I felt about, the Academy Awards, and all of the things that entails. And I had said that, I early on, when I was in college, and then also especially after college, but when I was in college, I always loved movies. I got exposed to film at a really young age, and grew up through the VHS, the time of the VHS, the decades of the late '80s, '90s, and but when I was in college, and shortly before college, which is in the late '90s, the DVD explosion happened. So at that point, I started becoming a pretty serious collector, and especially after college, I started collecting lots of movies. But I was really into. I loved older films that I grew up on, but I was really into current things, like things at the time that were coming out that were contemporary films. And I said in this interview that I had, subscriptions to, those things that don't really exist anymore. Those things called magazines. I had subscriptions to like Rolling Stone, Entertainment Weekly, subscriptions to various movie magazines, and I used to buy them frequently. But I used to really, really stay up on movies that were coming out, and I used to watch and follow the Academy Awards every year. I used to almost kind of plan my weekend. I would look forward to it and I would watch it. And I also was so on top of it as far as that kind of thing goes. I used to watch every film that was nominated. I would see. I would see, I'd make a formal list, and every film that I came across that was nominated, even if it was a foreign film or whatever it was, I would see them. And so usually by the time that the night that the Academy Awards was going to happen, I had already seen all of those movies. So I used to stay really up on it. But over time, I realized, okay, there is some merit behind it. But then I kind of got turned off to a lot of different aspects of the Academy Awards. I felt like, being that I love horror films so much, I felt one of the things that happened was, there were certain films that had come out and certain things that happened where a lot of actors in movies were just being completely ignored. And I became more and more disenchanted with it. And I kind of looked at it as just more of a, it became, and I always realized and thought that that's what the Academy Awards was or made up of, but I looked at it as more, for me, it just became a pure spectacle. It really wasn't about the quality of the work. One of the big things, a pivotal thing that made me change my view of it was when Ari Aster had put out Hereditary, which is, I think, just one of the best kind of more modern day horror films in modern times, but in recent years. And I thought Toni Collette's performance in that film was pretty extraordinary. And I thought it was so good that even outside of the horror genre, it was just a damn good performance. And I was really, because I was invested in that whole kind of thing, in that world, the Academy Awards. I was kind of, really let down at that she wasn't nominated at all. And it was kind of never even, the movie wasn't even mentioned. So I became more and more disenfranchised, and a few other things happened, and I just kind of gave up on it. But, obviously, there is some merit to it. There is something to it that is important, but I became more and more distant. I had more and more distance between myself, and these award shows, particularly around the Academy Awards. And I literally hadn't followed it I stopped following it for many years. So, and the other thing that really happened was a lot of it has a lot of it had to do with streaming, where a lot of films were, in the last 3 or 4 years, most of the films that were, kind of nominated for the Academy Awards were films that were, you know, these various companies that are streaming companies. A lot of these films were either only exclusively on, you could only see them on the streaming platforms, or their original projects or films that were created by or that were financed by these companies. And I don't really do any streaming for various reasons, and I've talked about that a lot. So there were a lot of movies that I did not get to see for a while. I wouldn't see them until way after, and I just kind of forgot about it. And I kind of felt that some of the films over the years that I had seen, here and there, that were nominated were a little bit too overly hyped, and they really weren't pushing any envelopes. And I just became more and more disenfranchised, or just I definitely became more I felt myself pushing that whole thing away. So, but every now and then, I particularly, I think it was 2 years ago, there was a film that won Best Picture, and it was a movie called Parasite, and it was a foreign film, and I was really blown away. It it was kind of an historical moment for the Academy Awards when a foreign film wins Best Picture. That never happened, and it's an extraordinary movie, and I was really blown away by that. In the 2000, this was the 2019 the Academy Awards, and Parasite had won, and I was really, really surprised by that because, like I said, I thought it was of some serious historical significance. A foreign film had never won Best Picture, and Parasite was directed by Bong Ho Bong Jo Bong Jo Ho, who is a Korean director who is easily one of the greatest directors around. I mean, just an extraordinary director. Parasite is an incredible movie. And again, it was a movie that kind of defied category. It was one part black comedy. It was very, very suspenseful. It was a real deep melodrama, and it also had heavy elements of horror, and it was a film that was extraordinary and highly inventive and really bold, but it just really defied category. Really new and just so many new and fresh ideas, and it grabbed from so many different genres. And Bong Joon-ho is, like I said, I think one of the best directors. He's one of my favorite directors. His films and his track record is just extraordinary. Another film that he did, which is probably my favorite of his career, is Memories of Murder, which is just a masterpiece, and that's going to be a movie that I'm going to eventually do a show on. Just an extraordinary movie. Can't say enough good things, and it's a movie that I never hear talked about. Other films that he did was, well, Parasite, which came out in 2019. It was the first time a foreign film won Best Picture. Extraordinary movie. Memories of Murder, like I just mentioned, came out in 2003. He's a director also, Bong Joon-ho, who crosses genres. He'll do horror movies, he'll do monster movies, he'll do melodramas, you name it. He's not afraid to take risks and chances. All the things that I love about powerful directors, or what I feel makes them powerful, or what creates, what when a director I feel leaves a legacy behind, it's usually because of those elements. He did another movie that is super awesome called Snowpiercer with Chris Evans, which is a sci-fi movie, which is awesome. The Host, which is a straight up monster movie, like a creature feature, awesome movie. Mother in 2009. Again, just such an extraordinary director. So when he won for Parasite, I was like, holy mackerel. Like, I kind of feel like, well, in general, I think we kind of live in the Matrix. The Matrix, classic sci-fi movie. But I think in general, socially, politically, and how we just interact as people, and the class warfare that we are involved in, all of those things, the use of media, how we share ideas. I feel like we live in the Matrix anyway, but I feel like every now and then there's a glitch in the Matrix. And I feel like I felt like when Parasite won, that's an example of a glitch in a Matrix, of something with true power behind it and true passion that comes from, totally from left field, or for that matter, from some kind of, thing of where it's totally outside of the system that we're conditioned to really believe in, leaves creates an extraordinary impression, and it is kind of unprecedented. And I kind of look at that as an example of that, so when Parasite won, I was like, wow, holy mackerel, like that's pretty cool. And again, I thought it was of without a doubt, I definitely thought without a doubt it was a moment of historical significance because that had never happened where a foreign film, and there's so many great foreign films that have happened that have come over the years that win best picture for best foreign film or they get nominated or they don't, or they don't get nominated. But for so long they've been kind of they've had this stigma against around them that, well, they're just foreign films and they're not looked at, in terms of what the people who, the board or the foundation of the Academy Awards never look at them as, well, they're just good movies. And I saw this as an event that was a significant seismic event, but of a super like historical significance. So I was like, wow, like that's pretty cool. I was really, so every now and then I'm kind of surprised what sneaks in and what sets off a fire, especially within the world of the Academy Awards. And I think when those moments happen, it's extraordinary. Like to me, that really fires me up as a fan of film and of art, and where something that is unconventional gets the it's just deserves, and it gets the acclaim that it deserves, for what it's worth, So, but again, my history with the Academy Awards, like I said, at one point I used to follow it, religiously. And I've just like over the years lost faith. Not that I had faith, and I don't really believe in the word faith or the concept of faith, but symbolically, that did happen. So, and Parasite won in 2019, and the the following years, like I never really, again, I kind of went back to my old relationship with the Academy Awards. I never really paid attention to it very much. I never really, you know, and I just kind of is. I just looked at it for what it is. What it is. And I eventually, a lot of the movies that do get nominated, I do eventually see them all, but it's usually, over a span of a long period of time. And a lot of that is due because a lot of these films are only released through streaming platforms. So there's a big lag, of time for me until I see these movies, but I eventually do. But I see it in I eventually see these movies kind of after the fact. It's not something, around the buzz of the buzz that kind of that world has of the Academy Awards. I see it, without that kind of cloud around it. I just see the movies for what they are. And it was funny because the other day I went on Facebook, and again, it's something I've talked about too. I generally, when it comes to Facebook and social media, I generally use it for the promotion of, gigs that I'm involved in, or events that I'm involved in, and especially with stuff like this, with, doing my coverage of films. I pretty much just, use social media for that. I use, obviously YouTube here. This is YouTube. I use Facebook for, music things, and for my film page, Film Fanatic. And then I also have Instagram. And I use that for film. That's main at Film Fanatic. That is just a movie page as well. I do have my own personal page on Facebook, but I generally don't post anything about my personal life on it. And I generally don't really engage with people as far as when it comes to posts or like debates, or because I feel like, yeah, it's cool in a lot of ways, but I feel most of the time those things, when you engage with somebody, if it's about, like, say, politics or religion, or your strong opinions about certain things, generally it always dissolves into a shit show. because people can't be. I feel like it's impossible for most people. There's a lot of people that can do it, but I think it's impossible. It's virtually impossible for most people to like the way they will get into a debate or communicate with somebody who clearly you disagree with. And I feel like it's always a thing of where people cannot be, I've always thought like, well, you can have a healthy debate or a conversation with somebody who you might completely disagree with, but you can also, you can do it in two ways. You can be a real kind of bully about it. You can be very confrontational where you're picking a fight, which I think happens all the time. But then you can also do it in a way of where you can bring a good case for your argument, but you can be really, really, respectful and not cross that line of where you're, flat out insulting that person. But I think 98% of the time that I've seen when those things happen on Facebook is it's all personal and people cross that line and they can't respect that person's opinion or that person for that matter, and it becomes this like bullying kind of scenario, and it becomes like two kids in the schoolyard fighting, and it becomes totally asinine and juvenile, and you can't really converse with that person or that party anymore because they they get I don't know, incredibly bent out of shape, or they start attacking the person, and they can't do it in a respectful manner. So that's one of the reasons, well, pretty much the main reason I don't engage with people, in that way. I have had circumstances and situations where I've talked with people, and it can be really healthy, and you can exchange different ideas, and you can have people from very different backgrounds or with incredibly different or even to a degree polarizing opinions, but you can have a cool like civil discourse about it and be respectful and be mindful of that. So I was on Facebook the other day and I saw a couple of people, one person in particular who I know, and some folks that I know who, are, we have mutual friends on Facebook. And I saw this post about this incredible movie that I saw last year, which I think is easily one of the best movies I saw of last year. And I kind of think it's one of the best movies ever made. And that movie is called Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. And again, I didn't even know that this movie was even nominated for an Academy Award. I saw lots of buzz about the film. I saw it in the theater through a recommendation from a friend, and I was just completely floored by this film, blown away in every conceivable way. So I saw that on Facebook that people were basically saying, well, they were just trashing Hollywood and they were trashing the Academy Awards because the Academy Awards were on Sunday, this past Sunday. And all these folks were going on this big diatribe about how much Hollywood sucks and that it's all BS and that it's a zoo and it has no like there's no real there's nothing about it that has any depth, and that it's just this theatrical glamour show. And I agree with that. I think that there's many aspects of it, of the award ceremony and the show itself, that is, it's too heavy. It is heavily political. There's a lot of BS around it, and that's one of the reasons I've distanced myself. But again, every now and then something gets through, and you're like, holy mackerel. Case in point, Parasite. And so people were commenting, and they were just trashing the Academy Award, saying that they turned it off, and it was one of the worst ones they ever had seen. And then I saw it on the feed that everything everywhere all at once, which came out last year, was apparently nominated for Best Picture, and it was nominated for Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best I mean, you name it. It was nominated for every conceivable award that there is for the Academy Awards, and I didn't know that. And I was like, wow. And then I saw another thing on the post that it won every award, and I literally at that moment my jaw dropped. I was just like, wow, holy mackerel. Because everything, everywhere, all at once, I think, like Parasite, it is a movie that truly defies category. It is, there's so many genres within this movie. You have like the martial arts genre, you have the heavy sci-fi genre, you have the melodrama, you have, well, I would even say the kind of the avant-garde is very much part of this movie. It's incredibly funny. I would even say it's probably even got to a degree some elements of horror. I mean, so many different genres are packed into this movie. And I really felt when I saw this movie, I saw it in the theater. I went into it totally cold. A buddy of mine had recommended it to me. And I talked to a couple of other friends and we went to go see it. He's like, don't look it up. Don't check anything out about it. I hadn't even seen the trailer for it. He's like, just go see it. I don't know what you're doing this weekend. Just go see it. Go into a cold. So I went, and I was just completely blown away. I thought the film. My first impression of the film was that I thought it was the one of the most adventurous and one of the most imaginative movies I've ever seen, especially from last year. And like again, like I said, I felt like it defied category. And at the heart of this film, because and again, it had there's so many influence from so many genres of films or so many it pulls from so many various genres. At the heart of the story, I felt like it's a family movie, and I just felt like it had so much heart and so much soul to this movie, and I just so like the characters, even though there was so many things going on, there was so much color on this canvas, which in certain levels, if it was a film that was directed by people who were less talented, it might have it might be a thing of where it could be looked at as more of a theatrical experience, and that's it. But this movie at the core was kind of a family movie, and I just felt as a viewer, you just you cared about every person that was on the screen, and it just had real heart and soul to it. And then you had all of these other concepts that were part of this film on this incredibly grand, magnificent scale that was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. So it was, an unprecedented movie going experience. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I was completely blown away, and when I saw that it won Best Picture, I couldn't believe it. Because on one aspect, like the movie has all of these aspects, and again, I said it does have this aspect where I would almost consider it to be, you know, avant-garde, like completely strange. Like there's aspects of the film and concepts of the film in the film, particularly around the sci-fi element, where it's completely bonkers crazy. Like it's so out there and so wild and crazy, but yet I feel like it's still grounded because the characterizations are so incredibly done. The writing is so good, and at the heart of it, it's just such a really great melodrama. So it does have this ground, like you feel like things are still grounded in a story that you can really latch onto, even though it has these concepts and ideas that are just so out there and so incredibly strange. And because of that, and when I saw that it won Best Picture, and not only Best Picture, but it won every award across the board, I was just like blown away by it. I couldn't believe it. I just could not believe it. My jaw dropped. And I thought, wow, like this is unprecedented that a movie that is such a film that is so courageous and really a risk, you know, these filmmakers made such an incredible, uh, you know, risky venture with putting this movie out, and really, I think push the envelope to the eighth degree or to the 10th degree, and to see, you know, in a movie in a lot of ways that it has a little bit of that commercial appeal, but in many ways not at all, like not at all. To see that that won, you know, it won a series of these awards that, you know, are looked at as the most prestigious awards that a film can make. I was floored. I was just like, holy mackerel! Like that's it's as crazy as the movie is. And the directors of this incredible movie, which I was pretty familiar with, Daniel Kwan and Daniel Schurant, they were the essential directors and writers of this film. And they did a movie probably about, or actually, I should say, it came out in 2016. It's called Swiss Army Man. And it stars Daniel Radcliffe and Paul Dano. And that movie is completely bonkers crazy, completely insane, but amazing, amazing. And again, it's one of those films that it's so hard to really categorize. It's something you need to see to be able to experience it. You can't really describe it to a person who hasn't seen any of their work. You know, I feel like these guys are, as filmmakers, not only do they pull from so many, you know, sources of material and from so many genres, they I think essentially they create their own manual, or on one hand destroy all of the rules that one thinks that you need to have to make a film, and yet they create, and then they kind of burn that manual to ash, but then they also create their own rule book and create their own reality as to how they think a film should be made, like, you know, by doing something that is visionary and something that is not going to be so easy to categorize. And Swiss Army Man, like again, that came out 2016, and I seen that movie and I was just like, wow, like this is just wild. And they also did Everything and Everywhere All at Once, and this movie is almost even more on a level of where I would almost say it's even more high concept and even more adventurous. You know, I was just completely blown away. So, but at the same time, when I was watching, while going through this feed on Facebook, you know, like again, everybody was that was, you know, it was a post, and you know, every person was basically just taking a a shit on the Academy Award, saying that it's just another shit show, and Hollywood is just doing its thing again, and it's not about quality, and you know, blah blah blah, and it's just, you know, this, like, you know, all it is about permeating, you know, where they just want to cultivate this, you know, by the numbers crap and formulaic, you know, they just want to turn out formulaic movies and all this kind of stuff. And you know, I understand that those frustrations and those arguments. I mean, for instance, look at the movies that I cover. I mean, most of the movies that I cover are completely outside of what is the Hollywood system in every conceivable way. But I also love big budget Hollywood films. You know, I think a movie, again, like I said in the beginning of the show, if a movie resonates with me and I love it, I don't really care. I don't really care if it's got a $300 million budget, or if it was made for, you know, $50,000. Like, yeah, it's like it's easy sometimes when you talk about films, or you know, when you are seeking things out, or you want to, it's easier to use labels and to categorize things, and we all kind of naturally gravitate to certain things like we do. And so that's a part of our way we communicate things, as humans, is by using labels. And so I understand that, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really mean anything. So, but I understand that frustration, and I share that frustration. But the thing that I was blown away by were the when I saw that Everything and Everywhere all at once won Best Picture, was there were a few people in this post that were saying that, well, one person in particular had called the movie a big pile of dog shit. And then they also said, well, this was just another example of like big liberal Hollywood just turning out another, pile of crap. And I was just like, and my jaw dropped. It dropped even almost further to the ground than when I saw that this movie won Best Picture. I was just like, what? And I usually don't, like I said, I don't usually engage with people this way because, most of the time it can't be done, or it's not. It ends up dissolving, or ends up being ends up slowly getting flushed down a toilet bowl, and things become a shit show. It becomes a circus, and people aren't respectful, and people get all butthurt, and blah blah blah. But when I saw that this person had come out and said, well, this is just a typical example of what Hollywood churns out every year, I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, what? So I commented on this post and to this person, and I had said that, like, opinion. But and then the other thing was that this person had referred to this movie as a pile of dog shit. And I said, I started off the post by basically saying, well, you know, opinions are one thing. Like, I don't want to, and I've said it before in other videos, I don't want to live in a world where we all have the same opinions. That would be boring. Variety is the spice of life. People should make up their own minds and have things they like and they don't like. I mean, that's just how we are. And we can express how we think about things, and we should be able to. And and I think, but when it comes to people who have opinions that are strong on one hand, but they're so polar opposite, and I think it's possible to have a conversation with that person, or even lay out the case as to why you feel strongly about something. But you can do it in a real, like, respectful manner. You can do it where it doesn't become this highly personal kind of thing, and you can just lay out your case, but you can respect that person. You can keep it civil. And I just felt, by this woman just kind of calling this movie a pile of dog shit, she can say whatever she wants. But I just felt, well, to me, that's just really juvenile and, kind of a disrespectful way of expressing your opinion. And just, I just felt like it's the most low grade, or the most, you know, immature way to express yourself. And and but I also said this person is totally entitled to their opinion. But I just felt, it is what it is. But I think there's a little bit more of a way to lay out a case, or to describe how you feel about a film without having to come across like this person is 10 years old. And that was my first impression. But the thing that really irked me was that she was saying how this film was just another example of something that Hollywood just turns out every year. And I felt, and I had said, well, our opinions are one thing, but I said, I think you're just, flat out wrong, because I felt that this movie was one of the most bold, and one of the most imaginative, and one of the most adventurous movies I had definitely seen last year of 2022. and in general, one of the most adventurous movies I'd ever seen in my life, one of the most original movies. And to say that it's part of the Hollywood system, I just thought was completely insane. Because I felt like what this movie did, and all of the things that made this film up, and what these filmmakers did, and the whole kind of creation of this movie, it was it's so unconventional, and it flies in the face of every conceivable rule or law that Hollywood, like quote unquote, the Hollywood system has laid out for the last 100 years. Like completely outside of the system in every conceivable way possible. Like it does not at all fit into convention in any way, shape, or form. And I had said that that was basically what I said, and I'm like, well, where's the example that this movie is part of this like cookie cutter formula that Hollywood puts out? And there wasn't any real response, and it was basically the same old thing. Um, and I just thought she was flat out wrong, and came across as somebody who was just totally juvenile in her response by calling this movie a pile of dog shit. I often make the analogy, and it's a little bit of a different thing, but I often make the analogy, and I understand like in with social media and people on YouTube and things, like people want to get ratings, they want to get attention, they want to create that kind of, that feeling of like driving by an accident because it garners buzz. So a lot of the times people want to like, if they don't like something, they want to shit on it as much as possible. And I get that, and I understand it, and people can do that. But I also feel that you can do that in a much more like adult way. I and still you can totally dislike something and not and even hate it to a degree, but you can still like be respectful, And I feel like with social media and just how things are in general, you know, it doesn't happen. And I understand. I see like there's a couple of YouTube guys that I like, music and film, where they do music and film coverage, and they purposely attack things and curse and scream at the film and shit all over it. And I know they do that because that is like, a confrontational way, and that brings you followers. That brings attention. And there's also other people out there that have the same exact strong opinions, but they kind of don't come across as, these middle school, high school kids that are just angry at the world. And I kind of feel like they can still be respectful. And I lose respect for people when they come across as, in a where their way of expressing themselves in a way that, or as to why they don't like something, when they express themselves like they're on the school playground with their buddies and they're like 10 years old, when they come across that way, you lose a lot of respect for them, because I just feel like they come across as like dumb heads, like just juvenile. But I understand that. But I often like, and this is something that I talk about. It's something I probably think about too much, but I often use the analogy, and I know the analogy is a little bit of, maybe a little bit of a stretch. But one of the things that I always do, and it has come up for me, the analogy that I always make when this kind of topic comes up a lot, in regards to, when you have a very strong opinion, or you clearly don't like something that maybe the people around you really like, and it's, to a degree, a real polarizing thing. One of the examples that I use is, and a lot of times this comes up, but the big example that I use to kind of try to get my point across about it, and how I think, and how my way of thinking is around this subject is the Grateful Dead analogy. And and again, it's something, it's a little bit far removed from this whole talk, but then again, I feel like it's very much a part of it. And so, for example, when I've talked about this kind of issue with people, and I've talked about, you know, you can like something or not like something, and the way you carry yourself or the way you express your opinion of it, you know, for something that you really don't like, but you can still be respectful about it. So, like, the way I bring it up a lot of the times, or the way I could try to, you know, show that idea is like the Grateful Dead analogy. Where, okay, so like we live here in Maine, and the Grateful Dead, for instance, is a tremendously popular band. Not only in Maine, obviously, but they're a world-renowned band. But here in Maine, in particular, in particularly, they are extremely popular. You know, I've often made a joke, sometimes with friends, where, you know, if you want to put together a band in our local area, and you want to like automatically have like success, you know, you can, if you put together a cover band of the Grateful Dead, and you get, you know, a couple of sets worth of, you know, of their music, and you have it really tight, and you have a good show, and you market it as that, you're guaranteed to have an audience. Like, you know, and I also thought, you know, if you want to have, another thing you could do is like you could put together, say, a reggae band, and have something that is put together that is, you know, maybe even more in the guise of, like, say, more modern reggae music, but you're kind of garnered to have an audience already, or even like, say, a country band or folk. You know, if you put together a band that played, say, an endless list of Bob Dylan songs, like, you know, people who form those kinds of groups, you know, you can pretty much, you're guaranteed an audience, just because that's what people love around here. You know, I think the majority of people love music in those styles, and I love some of those styles quite a bit. But when it comes to the Grateful Dead, I play in a lot of bands, and I've had lots of scenarios and situations where I've had to play a lot of their music, you know, for covers, and those songs always seem to go over very, very well. And I've never really, you know, been a fan of their music. I've tried. I have, you know, I've been exposed to all of their music. You know, I've had situations happen where even fans of their music that I know have even, you know, they've said, I've listened, like, again, I've said I've listened to a lot of their albums over the years. I've never really, it never really sparked my interest. I never really, you know, it never really did it for me. There was an album I got into when I was in my 20s or 30s, that was an album called The Pizza Tapes, with Jerry Garcia, who was the lead guitar player and more or less the leader of the Dead, with Dave Grissom, and they put out this album, The Pizza Tapes, and I really actually love that album. I think it's a really great album. But I tried listening to their studio albums, and I never really liked it. I never really got into them. And I had heard from lots of hardcore Grateful Dead fans that even from their perspective, they didn't really like their studio albums. They were always saying, what you should do is check out bootlegs, check out their live stuff, like they were a live band. And I spent lots of time doing that. And I still kind of always go back to the same point, that it's not really my jam. You know, when it comes to like things that are labeled as, like, say, jam band kinds of things, I like, and again, it's just my opinion, but for my taste, I like music that has a little bit more of an edge to it. I like the music that's quote unquote you could look at as jam band music, that has a little bit more of an edge. It's a little darker. It's a little more raw. You know, groups like Can, or like early Pink Floyd, things like that. Like, I look at them to a degree as kind of being jam bands in their own weird way. But to me, like, their music has more of an edge. It's a little darker. It has a just a little bit more rawness. It's got a little bit more of a raw aesthetic to it. That's the stuff that I really love when it comes to like quote unquote jam band stuff. But at the same time, and I've tried and tried, and I clearly could not find anything with the Grateful Dead that resonated with me. But at the same time, I've been in many situations. I've had to learn and play a lot of their songs, and I see that people love that music, and I have respect for that. And at the end of the day, I don't really like their music at all. I don't see what all of the incredible hype is around their music, and that's my own personal opinion. But at the same time, I have total respect for them. I'm not. I could take two routes when I'm describing that. I could say just dismiss them, the Grateful Dead, entirely and say, well, they're just a bunch of dirty, smelly, fuck off hippies, and their music sucks, and they're shit, and they're a pile of shit, and that's it. Or I could take the opinion, which I do, and this is the way I express it, and this is the way I feel, is that that music's clearly it's not my jam. It's not music that I like at all. There's a lot of things about it I don't really like. I have issues with certain things, in particular around their music. But at the same time, I have immense respect for them. I I regard Jerry Garcia as a really great guitar player. He was an incredible musician. I really am also a fan of Billy Hart, the drummer and percussionist. I think he's done some incredible things. But the legacy and what they've done as a band demands respect. And they laid the groundwork for millions of other bands and what they did in regards to for independent artists. Like they were a band that worked completely outside of the system and created something totally new and original and innovative that was essentially this grassroots movement. And they laid the groundwork for millions of independent artists and bands to kind of create their own thing. And I feel like that legacy that they created as a band, to a degree, is historical, and that commands respect. So I could not take that route of saying, well, I just don't like them, so they're just shit. I mean, that's a real, I feel, just a real ignorant way to view that. So I can like them, or in my case, I don't like their music, but I can have total respect to them for them and give them the props that they deserve. And that's how I look at. That's how I usually describe it on the level of how I look at things that I like and that I don't like. That's really it. So I just wanted to talk about these things, and in particular with this great movie that just blew me away. Not only the movie itself, everything, everywhere at once, all at once, winning, just an incredible movie in general. But then seeing that it actually won the Academy Awards and won every award. But the main discussion or talk about the show was how we can kind of carry ourselves when we have very different opinions and how we can express those things. So this is Jason Dean, and thanks again. If you like this channel, please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. And enjoy the snow. Peace.